Next, we're going to talk about some actual evidence that we see with living organisms. So contemporary changes, these are ones that we can see within our lifetime. For example, pesticide resistance in insects. As farmers are able to use pesticides to try and keep their crops cleaner and keep pests from going through and consuming their product, well, guess what? It doesn't actually kill every one of the pests. So, for example, some of these bugs are able to survive what the fumigation, and those are the ones that are going to reproduce. If it is a genetic component inside them that makes them resistant to those specific pesticides, they will pass that on to their offspring. So now you end up with a new type of bug that's able to come in, get into crops and agriculture, and the pesticides that were currently being used will no longer work on them. That is an actual change as the organism evolves that we see within our lifetimes. Another one that's similar to this is antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Bacteria have the ability to reproduce very quickly. As they reproduce, some bacteria are able to reproduce every 2 hours. So every 2 hours, if one of them is resistant to a specific antibiotic, or they've been given a smaller dose to make them more resistant to it, such as if somebody doesn't finish their full antibiotics that they've been given, then those bacteria are going to be the ones that reproduce. Now, if we start out with one and they reproduce every 2 hours, by the time we have a 24-hour period, that one has turned into 4,096 specific bacteria. Those are then going to reproduce in the next 24 hours, and pretty soon that bacteria has now taken over to where the antibiotics that we are using to treat them are no longer doing anything. So it is important that we try and limit the use of antibiotics to when they are necessary, and when they are necessary, we need to use them to their full prescribed, through the full prescription, to try and eliminate any of them that might have any type of growing resistance. This resistance is something that we are fighting with all the time. It takes about 2 years to develop new antibiotics, and that is extremely slow. All it takes is a specific bacteria or two that have become resistant to it. They can evolve, and now we don't have anything to fight them with, which now makes things like surgery and treating minor injuries something that becomes a lot more difficult because we do not have antibiotics, which are a major tool used to prevent people from dying. For example, in the Civil War, if you got shot, you had a higher probability of dying from the infection from it than you did from the actual bullet wound. But now that we have antibiotics, we can treat the wound, we can treat the bacteria that have got in there, and now you have a much, much higher chance of surviving. We can also see these evidences, these changes in organisms with domestic animals. For example, with dairy cows now are able to produce 80, 100 pounds or more of milk per day. That is easily a 50% increase in productivity than their predecessors were 50 years ago. So we're able to produce animals that can give us much more on the same per animal. We now have beef animals that can give us much more meat off of them than they were before. Chickens that are able to lay larger eggs more regularly. These are all evidences we can observe within our lifetime of things that are actually changing. There are a few more that we're going to go over in the next couple of videos. So that should be it for this one.